Oh, that was great. They actually got this recovered right away for us and got it right back to me. Um, so that's super. I told them they could keep the coils or toss them or do whatever they wanted. I might, they did give them back to me in a box, so I guess they didn't want them, so I might take the one coil looked like it might have been leaking a little bit, but the condenser coil looked like it was still in pretty good shape, and we might find a use for that in the future. I think what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to shorten these leads up. Let's get this insulation off here, because we don't have any need for this. This was just to keep this line from sweating all over the place. This would have been the, or is still, the suction line. There's probably, we'll leave that on there. And have it glued on, I guess. I think it's pretty stiff. Should be copper, but it feels like steel. Pretty ugly. Thinking we could put our tap right here for our low side if we wanted. Looks like it's 5/16 copper. I think the taps I got are all 1/4 inch, which will go inside that tube nicely. Maybe we'll see what we can do there. I might take this out and put the let me grab these taps. I picked up these. These were, again, very inexpensive. I don't know if I'd use them on my air conditioning unit, but for this, they'll be great. It looks like they are soldered. I know some of these cheap ones are epoxied, but these seem to be soldered on. Yeah, that looks like they're soldered. Yeah, I think these 5 taps were $11. Schrader's with the nice cap with the Schrader remover. Yeah, so maybe we'll solder that right in there. I'm not sure what I want to do with that. I think what I'm going to do, this is really stiff. I think I'll put my low side tap right here. Just feels like it's, yeah, it came from me. We're going to cut that out. We will cut that, swing in here, trying to give that a cut right there. And I don't know how people feel about this. I'm always told not to use a pipe cutter, cutting tubing or pipe, because it leaves a ridge. Now with refrigeration, you certainly don't want to use a hacksaw. So what I do usually is I'll use this pipe cutter, but I won't cut all the way through the tubing. I'll cut most of the way through the tubing, and then once I have it scored, I'll bend it back and forth until it breaks off, and you'll see it kind of tears. This way it doesn't drop anything in the system, and it doesn't leave a ridge. Now for this project, it doesn't really matter. If we had a ridge on there, we don't really care about flow or anything else. We'll remove our Schrader, of course, because we're going to solder this in. Just make sure this tubing fits. Yeah, that'll be fine. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll get that cleaned up. I'll put a piece of tubing in there, we'll get that cleaned up, and then go from there. We'll grab a This is actually a double flaring set. Not that you'd use that in refrigeration, but I do use it on brake lines for cars. But these are great, so you don't have to use a coupling or anything. You would, they're called swedges, and you would take this and you tap this in. Let me grab a hammer. I guess there was a little film left in there that they didn't completely get out. Mostly oil, it feels like. Okay. So that'll make it a little more challenging to solder it. We'll have to make sure we get that really clean. It's a shame there's oil in that tube. I think I'm going to take that out. Okay, put you on pause for a second here. Okay, now this is a ridiculous amount of torch that you would never use for this, but I do automotive work, and that's some automotive work, and that's what this is really geared towards. This is the smallest tip I have for it, and I think as long as I'm careful, this will be fine to do the silver soldering with. I'll just take it really easy. It'd certainly be great to get this out. I usually don't wear gloves when I do this, but for the purpose of YouTube, I will go grab a pair of gloves. That being said, I'm not really sure I can operate this torch with these gloves on, but we're going to give it a try. A little difficult. I'm going to go with maybe a softer flame than you normally would, because this is pretty big tip. I'm sure you guys can see this. Raise this up just a little bit. And heat this till we see it get turned to liquid, and then we'll just rotate it easily, because we certainly don't want to break this off from there. There we go. That was pretty straightforward and easy. I think this is going to be fine for soldering this in. So we'll put one shader right here. I'm not sure if I like that. So I want to put a little bit of a bend in that. This is usually pretty hard tubing to bend. I think we're going to solder it in just like that. I think both of them being up are kind of cool. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you on pause. I got to go grab some emery paper, some flux, and some silver solder, and I'll be right back. Okay, I think I decided I really don't like this straight up. Maybe at least for this one, I'm just going to be going to a recovery bottle. This one's going to be coming from the system, so straight up might require a little more length in the hoses. So I thought what I would do is I'd put some 90s on here. I'm not sure which direction they need to be just yet. Really depends how I'm going to mount the pump. But this 90 we can reuse for sure. And maybe what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll show you this stuff. And we'll need to make another 90 somewhere in this tube, but we'll go ahead and cut this off. Again, show you how I do this. Cutting this tube, it's just the way I've always done it. So Works great with capillary tubes too. If you're going to cut a capillary, you can just nick that with even a utility knife or a pair of wire cutters. Wire strippers sometimes work if you get it on, and you run it around the capillary tube. It'll put a little mark on it, and then you can just snap the tube, and you don't have to worry about crimping the end of it or anything. It works great on capillary tubes, this method. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I'm just used to doing it. Of course, for this project, again, you could cut it with a hacksaw, cut it however you want, cut all the way through with the pipe cutter. Doesn't really matter. But if you get it about halfway through and then bend it back and forth, it'll snap off, and it makes a pretty good end there for you, so it doesn't have a lot of burr on it. I think we'll do it right about here. This way you can at least see maybe the swedge in action, how you join a piece of copper, typically in refrigeration without using a coupling, because it's one less joint, and one less joint means one less source of a leak, possible leak. So we want to use as few joints as possible. And you can see, you probably can't see this, but it's over half the way through the tube. But it's not all the way through. When I break it, it makes a nice clean break, nice clean opening, and then that can go here, or here. I'm gonna have to size that a little bit, but that'll go there for sure. Yeah, I just don't know which way I want to bring this out yet. We'll make, there's one almost made for us right here. This will probably be just fine. I don't think we'll need any more than that. Let's see if we can't. These little tubing benders are usually pretty inexpensive. They make ones that have a spring on them. They're pretty nice too. I've always liked this style. I don't know if you can see that, so that it does 1/4, 5/16, and 3/8. This one basically just rolls it around that nice radius so that you don't kink the tube. It comes out reasonably well. So we'll cut it right there, and we'll have our 290s. We can at least put our valves on them. So if we locate the bottle on this side and the system on this side, so what we'll do is we'll go to the recovery bottle this way. Our electrical connections will be here. Come in from here. The recovery system will be on this side. The recovery bottle will be on this side, and the system we're recovering from will be on this side. I think that'll be okay. That'll be a good thing. I think that'll work nicely. And I can show you some of this swedging, how we do that. Okay, that'll be good. It's good for holding it for us. So you'll take, yeah, you'll see where this is, tells you what size pipe it is. Tubing actually, 1/2 inch, 1/4, 3/16, 5/16. The interesting thing about this is, was originally purchased for automotive, and works great for refrigeration as well. You'll notice the 1/4 inch tubing holds 1/4 inch tubing, grabs a hold of it. But if you go for plumbing stuff, plumbing tubing, 1/2 inch let's say 1/2 inch water pipe, copper tubing, it's got a 1/2 inch inside diameter, nominal. Where refrigeration tubing, refrigeration people would call that 5/8 tube. This is called 1/4 inch tube. This does not have a 1/4 inch ID. I'm not sure what the ID of this is, but it's less than a 1/4 inch. Again, these are all nominal figures because back in the day when this was all made, they couldn't measure pipe or keep the quality control to that. So you'll notice that with iron pipe and galvanized pipe, these are all nominal numbers. If you actually try to measure that with a ruler, I think you'll be kind of surprised. But this is 1/4 inch tube as far as a refrigeration person is concerned. This will work with this block. So if you bought a tubing tool for a car, you should be okay. If you get something for plumbing, there's not too much flaring done in plumbing, so you won't see this too much. They'll use a lot of compression. I mean, there is some flaring stuff, but this block should handle pretty much anything you need to do. And what I do with this is, you're going to be driving this in, expanding one of these sides. So they're expanding this tube so that it will receive a tube of the same size. So you'll notice this goes in, and then it has to, it'll flare up over this, and then this will actually create a larger, it will actually stretch that tube so another tube of the same diameter can slip inside of it. So when you put this in the block, make sure you give it at least enough room for that whole piece to be in there, or you'll be poking out the side. This one's a little tough because it's bent right here, but if you, I can show you on a straight piece, it might make a little more sense or be a little easier for you to understand. You would put this tube in, you don't want to put it in like a foot, but you want to put it in enough so that when you drive this in, you're not trying to stretch the tube where the block is, right? So you would take this and you would try not to drop that. I'm trying to show this to you. Let's see if I can set it down. Well, we'll try it again up in the air. Normally you would set this down on something, but you'll get the idea of this. I will hammer this in. Until it, I don't really have to go all the way in, but I usually do. And you'll notice what it did was it stretched the inside of that tube. And since it's copper, and you can't do this with hard copper, but all this stuff is soft copper, you'll see what that did. And then if you have one without a rip on it, you see that'll go in. You can solder that beautifully, and it's got no, there's only one joint then, and so that's like a perfect thing that you want to do. It's going to be a little hard for me to show you on these. I mean, they're not hard to do, they're just hard to probably show on camera. Okay, I think what I decided to do is to use that one that I demoed you on, the one that I demoed, and I just put a little more bend in that. We'll use that instead of the really short one. Because I did manage to get this wedge in that, but it's not a pleasant thing to do. Them. I think that's what we're going to do. Yeah, I think so. So take this one. I'll brush wedging that one. Again, you only need to get this up enough for that tool to go in. You can go a little more than you need, but if you go too much, then you wind up folding the copper over and not getting this wedge. So again, it works pretty good if you lay it down. This is not the best table to do this on. Works pretty well. It's easier by hand on the table. Okay, so now we got both of our pieces made. We're going to solder one this way Just trying to decide if that's really the exact way I want the pump. Make sure I can get our cover on it. I can. I think that's how we're going to go with it. I think that's how we're going to solder that. So what we want to do is try to get some of this oil off now. This brake clean is great for removing dirt, grease, and dirt. Again, I don't know that I'd ever use it on a real refrigeration system because I have no idea how it would react. But for this, I think it's just fine. We got some memory here. So tear it into some thin strips. For this, I'll clean this tubing first with it out. I have a wire wheel over there. I'd normally probably just take it over the wire wheel, but you can see this cleans up pretty easily. And again, we didn't have to use any tubing. This was already attached to this compressor, so we didn't waste anything there. Make sure you get it really nice and shiny and bright. Really nice and bright. Really important. Because while, again, this isn't a refrigeration system, but if it had a tiny leak, I guess it wouldn't be the end of the world. But we're doing all this so we don't pump the refrigerant or bleed the refrigerant into the atmosphere. So we might as well try to make joints as good as we can. Be interesting because I've never soldered with a torch that large either, so we'll see how that goes. Give this just a little bit of a squeeze. And just clean this up a little bit while we got it here. Take one of these welding clamps, I think. I'll lock this down a little bit. Let's see what I'm doing here. Well, I think you get the idea. I'm putting this clamp on this pump to stop it from moving around so much. It's a little at an angle, and that's all right. Pull on it a little bit, get it clean. Okay. I'm just using regular candy flux. This is, well, it looks like it's dried out pretty good too. This is water soluble. You can put a little water in this and stir it up if you need to. I still have a little bit. This is regular silver solder flux. I think I would use, again, it's probably fine. I would usually use Harris. This is what I had laying around. I don't know where it came from or how old it is, but it looks to be pretty crusty. This is, I don't know what this is. It says it's silver solder. Slightly concerned about that. Let's see what it does. I think what I'll do is I will solder the ends on first, and if it's crappy, we won't use it. We'll solder the compressor. I'll go get some decent silver. Almost looks like it's jewelry silver solder or something like that. Thinking I might, well, let's see what it does. Thought I was out of gas, but well, let's see what this does. I'm really not sure about this solder. It doesn't help that this torch is many times too large for what we're using it for here, but let's see what happens. It's taking a solder. I can't complain about that joint. Yeah, I can't complain about that at all. Well, not silver solder. Sure looks like silver solder. Sure solders like silver solder. My position of the thing here, is that the way I want to be? I think it's about right. You guys can see that, yeah, I think you can see it. You know, I really haven't done anything like this before on YouTube. It's surprisingly more difficult to do this and film it. It's, I got to give those guys so much credit, and I always thought the post-production work was amazing that they do. I doubt you'll see anything like that from me, but it seems like it might take more time to do the editing than it does to actually do the work. It's just got a little more room here than I would like in the joint, but the solder looks like it's doing the job. A little tougher on the pump side because it's a little older and thicker. That joint didn't fit that well, but this one is pretty tight. This should be an easy one to join. Should have taken that gasket out of there. No sense in melting it. We made it this far. So maybe I was going to fix some jewelry at some point. That's the only reason I think I could have this tiny little solder. It must be like 32nd. It's very, very small. Okay, now the pump's pulling a lot of heat. This is taking a lot more heat, this joint. But there it is, it's flowing. A little crackle there I didn't like, but those joints, I'll give you a close-up of those joints after it cools down a bit, and we'll see what we think. Pause you now, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and we're totally not cold yet, but I'll show you what I did here. I put a couple welding clamps on here to hold that compressor down so we can start buffing those joints out, and see if I can I zoom in on one of those joints, and we'll start buffing that, maybe. Let's see how that goes. Do that one, then we'll bring it back out. I usually take a really thin strip. I'll tear this in a really nice thin strip. If I can get that screen back here so I can see what you're seeing. I'll take this and I'll tear this in a really thin strip. Maybe like 1/4 of an inch, something like that. You can see that. And then I'll take it, bring it around the joint, and I'll polish the joint. And then when I'm done this, I'll really take a good look and see if I got any, I guess a welder would call it porosity. You can usually tell if you got a little something that didn't quite take, because it won't polish. You'll see. I'm not saying you shouldn't leak test it just after you're looking at it, but I've seldom had one leak that looked, you know, that flowed really well when I soldered it and then looked really good when it was done. I haven't, knock wood, I haven't had much trouble with that ever. As long as you take your time and clean it beforehand. Now, this one, certainly not as clean as I would have made it if it was on a refrigerator or an air conditioner. But again, since we're making a little recovery system, I just want to make sure that it's a solid joint and it won't leak. It started raining on us, so we had to pull everything in really quickly, but I just wanted you to see how this joint turned out after a little polish. I think I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. And I took a minute to look up this solder. It looks like this particular company sells 4 different grades of jewelry solder, and they're rated in percentage of silver. This is the highest percent, 75%. If I remember right, HVAC stuff is usually around 50 or maybe even 45 to 55%. Maybe you guys can comment on that. I don't know in a real system whether this would be a problem, because maybe it's more prone to cracking from that vibrating compressor, but certainly in this system it's not going to make a difference, and I feel really confident that 75% silver isn't going to give me any trouble with the pressures for sure. So I'll be back at the next step.